Um, 5 days after he finished his Ph.D., he deployed to Afghanistan. He did it as a volunteer, and he did it as a volunteer for this reason. He said, how can I mentor cadets and my own children if I've never been? He also said that if this was happening in our country and you and Emily were at risk just because of your being girls, wouldn't you want somebody to come in and help educate and help do the things to help change the culture? He was not a combatant in any sense of the word. He was, let's change cultures, let's change people through coming in and showing compassion and empathy, working alongside of them, and educating just by kindness. And so when he got to Afghanistan, he was in the role of a trainer and an advisor. And he was actually a comm officer by training, but he'd only worked in that for 2 years before he became an Air Force Academy professor. But he was over there in that role as a comm person, but he was working with his languages also. And he was supposed to go to a place called Shindad, got diverted en route because of his languages to a place called Kandahar. And because I'm geographically stupid, I didn't realize that Kandahar serviced the Kabul airport. And he ate lunch often with a gentleman that had been in the Afghan military for almost as long as Phil. He'd been in 24 to Phil's 26 years. And he knew multiple languages. And so they would sit and they would practice their languages together. They taught. So this guy knew all about Phil's family. He knew, about Phil's story. Phil knew about his story, and Phil and I talked about it. What kills me is Phil knew his assassin. He was one of the last to die in the room. And he was the one that was able to get his gun out, but not able to get it off because of doing this. And Phil didn't feel any sense of danger. And I didn't feel any danger. I felt more danger when Phil was doing the drug wars, than I did when he went over to Afghanistan, because it sounds safe. Advisor, you're working with NATO troops. You are not over there. In America, you'd be in your blue uniform doing this. He was over there just working. And to me, it was an inconvenience. It wasn't a year-long deployment the same year that your kids are out of the house is kind of stinky. And so that's what I looked at it as, was an inconvenience with the time change and all of the other things that went with it. The hours that rotate around when you're deployed. It was hard to maintain a regular talking schedule like we like to, because I was a teacher, so I didn't have the flexibility to take calls either. And on the 27th of April of 2011, I went to work and I fired up my computer at work at 6:30 in the morning. And the ticker tape through MSN was 6 confirmed dead at the Kabul airport shooting. And I thought to myself, thank God Phil's not there, because I didn't know, the geography. And I was so relieved that I went next door and told my music teacher that. And I had never voiced that before. I went about my day. I went about my day doing everything that you do as a teacher. And then at 1:32 in the afternoon, the principal and the school counselor came down to my gym. And I had over 30 first graders in my gym. And the principal said, Linda, I need for you to come with me. And I'm thinking I'm losing my job. It was a day that my school district had basically declared bankruptcy. And I had volunteered to be the teacher to be let go, because I knew that when Phil came home from his deployment, that we were going to go somewhere for 4 years before we came back to the Air Force Academy and finish out his career. So it made logical sense that I'd be the one to lose my job versus somebody else. So I volunteered. And that's the thing about a body slam, is you think you might know what those body slams are going to be, but you really don't know. One day you wake up, everything's normal, and then you get smacked in the face with something. And so I'm following the principal up the school hallway, and I see all the media trucks outside. And I think, crap, I have to give an interview about losing my job and not say that I was a volunteer to do this. I need to be gracious. I need to formulate how I'm going to respond to the questions. Hit the office, and all the naughty kids are running out of the office, and the phones are ringing, and everybody's staring at me. And I'm still thinking, crap, everybody knows except for me, I'm losing my job. And yes, the media knew before I knew. In the Air Force world, we don't have loss like other branches, so we're not good at it. And things have changed based on my story and the things that went wrong. And I will say this, nobody intentionally did this because I'm Linda Ambard. They did it just their own reactions, their own grief, their own shock over this happening to an Air Force Academy professor. But if it can go that wrong at the Air Force Academy, it can go that wrong anywhere in the Air Force. But a general went on television at 10:30 in the morning and said, "Today we lost one of our own." That was all it took for the media to figure out who it was and where I was, where my kids were, and you could go on. And when I was being notified, they told me my kids had already been notified. So my kids were finding out on Facebook. They were finding out by overhearing a secondary friend talking about it. Um, I could just go on, and it put a whole new layer of trauma into something that was already traumatic. And I will say, I wasn't in resiliency then. I didn't teach resiliency. I was teaching PE. I taught elementary PE and high school English. But the very first thing that happened to me was I dropped my knees keening. I was so shocked, and I looked around at who's making that horrible noise, not realizing it was me. But as I dropped to my knees, one thought crossed my mind: how can I claim to have faith if in my darkest hour I turn from my faith? And yes, my spiritual resiliency does include a church faith, but not everybody's does. That's also why you do what you do, which became an important part of my positive, my post-traumatic growth. You know, I am a better person now than I was even before Phil died. And some of that came with the choices. When you have no choices, you can still, there's a little bit of control in being able to make choices. And so, and what do I mean by that? And I may be getting ahead of myself. You know, I didn't feel like lacing up my running shoes. But when I got to Dover, somebody had done some research and said, "Linda, you don't feel like running today. But if you go out and run, you'll be able to deal with what comes next a little bit better. You may not be able to run, maybe you just walk." And so I put on my running shoes, and in the 10 miles that I ran, I was able to get control enough of my feelings to make decisions about how I wanted Phil's funeral to look, his burial, being able to face the media and what I wanted to say to the media. Because I didn't want the media to know me, the out of control grief. I wanted it to stand for something, because Phil stood for a whole lot more than just a uniform. He was more than the military person he was. He was a husband and father, a mentor, a friend. And if I had been totally out of control when it came to media or the way I was responding to the things that were going wrong, I was dishonoring him. And I didn't want to do that. Where I really turned the corner was an event that you wouldn't think would make you turn the corner. I was running the Boston Marathon 2 years after Phil was killed. I had finished 26 miles. I was running in April. I was honoring Phil and the life that he had. I could see the finish line. I was one stoplight from the finish line. I was chasing down my finish line. The first bomb went off. As I'm processing what that bomb is, the guy next to me says, "Are they doing cannons at the finish line?" And I'm thinking to myself, they don't do cannons at marathons, and certainly not for 4-hour marathoners. And as I'm thinking about, the second bomb went off, and I fled for my life. I ran, and I can't remember anything, but I found myself cowering